Good, good afternoon. Please take a seat. This is the fourth and final forum we have in the context of the search for our president of the University of Iowa. And it's my pleasure to introduce Elizabeth Mill, the president of the undergraduate student body, who will introduce our guest.
Hello. I would like to go over a couple of housekeeping issues before I introduce our fourth candidate for the University of Iowa's 21st presidential candidate. Please make sure you silence or turn off all of your cell phones. Second, following Mr. Harreld's presentation, we will have time for questions. I would encourage you to use the microphone at the front right here, or write your question on an index card, which are located in the back of the room. Third, just as a reminder, the forum will end promptly at 6:15 p.m. or earlier if we finish with your questions. As you ask your questions, please be mindful of other members of the community who will also want to ask questions. Please keep them to one question initially and fairly short. Finally, we ask each candidate to, in their own words, answer the following question: what is your vision for the University of Iowa? Bruce Harreld currently owns his own consulting firm that advertises specific public, military, and private clients. Until recently, Bruce was a professor for entrepreneurship, management, and strategy at Harvard's Business School. In addition to his teaching duties, Bruce wrote many Harvard Business Review articles for publication. Prior to his position at Harvard, Bruce was the Senior Vice President of Marketing and Strategy at IBM Global Services US and IBM Canada Limited. Mr. Harreld was part of the leadership team that turned IBM around in the mid-90s and led a team of over 20,000 employees during his tenure at IBM. Prior to IBM, Mr. Harreld serves as president of Boston Chicken Incorporated from September 1993 to October 1995 and served on the faculty of Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management. Mr. Harreld holds an MBA degree from Harvard University and a Bachelor of Science in the Industrial Engineering and Operational Research from Purdue. Please welcome Mr. Harreld.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's truly a pleasure to be here. Can you hear me in the back? Good, thank you. I say it's a pleasure to be here. It's actually an honor. You're really a truly great institution, and to even be here today is it's an amazing opportunity for me. What I'd like to do is spend a few minutes. There's been a lot of discussion, and I think appropriate discussion, about my candidacy, because it's totally different than a lot of others. And be very clear, I don't have the administrative background a lot of other candidates do in these types of institutions. And I personally have struggled with that issue, as I suspect many of you have, when thinking about why I would want to do this. And I've as a number of members of the search committee know, I've gone back and forth. And let me tell you why I'm here. I'm here because I have helped other organizations go through exactly what I'm going to talk about with you in the next few minutes. Big and small, go through transformational change. I've led particularly public companies, corporations. I've done smart startups, and they all have a series of same issues. I've been through this. And so it's in that context that I say, well, maybe in fact, I have some role to play, and I might be helpful. You'll be the judge of that. But I think it's completely legitimate for you to ask, what the hell is this guy doing here? And I should also say, and I'll talk about it, as I get into what I think are some of the issues facing institutions of higher education, I hope it resonates with you. Because one of the things I see in a lot of organizations I've worked in and advised is that there's always a backroom conversation, maybe some would call it the water cooler conversation, about what the real big uglies are that institutions like this face. And part of what I will talk about, hopefully, is put some of those on the table in a constructive way and raise some questions about how, in fact, we deal with it. So, and I'm here because I think I do have the experience, and I've been there, but at the same time, I should say there's a trap here. And I think I want to be very explicit about the trap, because in my experience, creating a vision for the University of Iowa is critical. But more critical than that is executing it. It's great to have chartware and thoughts, but turning them into organizational action is where the real payoff is. And you don't do that by having somebody like me or anybody else stand on a stage like this and say, here's the vision, let's go do it. What needs to happen is an engagement, a discussion with the whole community on a number of issues over some period of time, so it starts to coalesce into an agreed upon set of priorities for the institution. I will give you my vision, but I want you to understand that in my book, I'm falling into that trap because it's not starting the dialogue that we need to have. It's a one-way conversation. I'm sure I'm going to get feedback as we go through this. So here's what I think is happening. And first of all, I think you're a great institution. I really, truly mean that. You have so many firsts, it's incredible. And in fact, it goes way back to, I have a daughter that without you creating the Master's of Fine Arts degree, probably wouldn't have a Master's of Fine Arts degree. You were leading the edge in that. You're leading the edge in terms of women being fully matriculated with the equal rights of men. We all know what you've done in terms of African Americans in law 100 plus years ago. You have more Pulitzer Prize winners on campus, I suspect, than most countries. And by the way, if not that, then in terms of the greater alumni group. So your great creative writing is world class. Under Jean's leadership and a lot of leadership I suspect here in the room, I met with some of them earlier today, you've actually really reinvigorated not only your healthcare system, but your medical school. And I can keep going. This is a truly great institution. And that's the reason I'm so honored to be here and humbled by this experience. But that's the good news. As I've said to a lot of people, that my experience is that organizations don't actually maintain themselves. They either go up or they go down. And a lot of the work I've done, research, in the basis of a whole course I taught in the second year at the Harvard Business School to MBA students is that winners can very quickly become losers. Great institutions have an ability to fall very quickly. Why would that be? The reason is because as they get excellent, they start hardening the things that made them so excellent. They start putting in place processes, standards, policies, IT systems. They actually hire people like themselves and screen for people. I was actually part of an institution that only wore white shirts many years ago in IBM. And everybody wore white shirts. They hired people like themselves. So what organizations tend to do, particularly, and it's sort of ironic, the better you are, the more likely it is you're going to fail. Now, it's not inevitable, but what's happening is the hardening of it. And then the world changes. Customers' needs change. Competitors start stealing away faculty or students. The technology changes. So something happens, maybe many things. I actually think in this case, for this industry, many things change. And the institution is somewhat trapped, maybe big time trapped, because it's hardened. And it starts hiring a lot of people for the past. And they build policies and procedures that were successful for the past. And part of the trick here is actually rethawing that and moving forward. So, and I think to a very large extent, and we'll talk, I suspect, more about it, culture is a big problem here in really successful organizations. Cultures, in my book, are control systems, even more powerful than financial control systems or IT systems. And it actually forms, and we've all experienced it. We join new organizations, and we say, oh, we don't do that. That's culture at work. And part of the issue here is, as good as you are, you need to prepare yourself for what's coming ahead. By the way, you all know that. I've heard a lot of that in private conversations throughout the day and in prior meetings here on campus. So that's a backdrop. Now then, what then are the strategic headwinds that are coming at, I suspect, the University of Iowa. I don't have as much data on it, but I do have a real sense of what's happening across the country, and maybe those two things collide. You'll be the determinant of that. One set of issues has to do with there are whole new people that are they're new entrants competing with us. And those are community colleges and technical schools. And as we've raised our tuitions to a very high level, it turns out, as a number of colleagues of mine at the Harvard Business School talk about, they're just good enough. And they actually go to those alternatives, and they get for a much lower cost, they get a reasonable education, and they find out, hey, that's not that bad. The other thing that's happening is the unbundling of, as our students get older and they have careers, the costs are so much higher. There's the unbundling. So they're going to institutions and picking up some credits. Another institution picking up some credits. Maybe a few years later picking up some other credits. And in fact, institutions are actually collecting those credits and granting degrees. And that is changing and disrupting. Then we have a whole series of technological innovations. And at Harvard, big-time set of discussions going on about edX, big-time conversations about Coursera, Khan Academy, Phoenix University. And and again, I think we can sit there and say, well, they're not really us, and they're not really any good. But you know what? What's your experimentation with that? What role do those things have going forward for this institution? So those are a set of issues. And then there are a lot of people, and I actually was one of those up until I started really taking a closer look at a lot of the financials. A lot of people say, the real driver in the tuition, which is, you know better than I, but it's some multiple of what real incomes are, is that a lot of people say, well, it's the salaries of the institution. Well, the real data says that's not quite as true. It's not nearly as much salaries as I think the population at large wants to say it is. It actually has an awful lot to do with scope creep. And that gets us into this issue of there's an intense rivalry of your conventional competitors, other Big Ten schools, other major research centers, for top talent at the faculty level and research level, and then even just as much at the student level. And part of both of those are rapidly adding more amenities. I used to say at Harvard, we did a piece of work a long time ago that said when you add a medical researcher, it was about a $5 million decision in terms of the labs and all the rest. My guess is some things I've seen recently say it's more like an $8 or $9 million decision. And you can't attract them without putting those investments in place. And so there's bidding war going on at that level. At the student level, I have 4 kids. They've all been wonderful beneficiaries of liberal arts education, even though I don't have one. And I actually used to say the schools are going to are country clubs with homework, because they're adding concierge services and lawn dry cleaning and climbing walls, and it goes on and on and on and on. And what's happening, and I'm not saying that's just the intense rivalry and competition for world-class talent at the faculty and student level is one of the biggest forces, I think, driving headwinds at an institution like this. Now, I say all that because I do actually believe there's a way through it. And my experience is we need, and I will use this phrase, and some of us write about this, and someone may be watching on the internet and they'll laugh, but the word is we need to be ambidextrous here. We need to actually dramatically go from great, which we are, institution, to a greater institution in our core. I'll define that in a second. And on the other hand, we also need to do some experimentation for the future and some innovation. They should not be enterprise risking in nature. They should be cautious and thoughtful. By the way, they should be led, I think, by a lot of the senior people, perhaps even here in the room. Too many organizations say the innovation is a young person's role, but yet those young people don't understand the culture, the policies, and the risks. And actually, those will need to get tested and changed for the innovation to actually take hold. And we have a tendency as leaders in organizations to not listen to the more junior people as opposed to senior people. And so we need to be ambidextrous. We actually need to take our core from great to greater and do some experimentation with new business models, new technologies, hybrid learning opportunities, others I suspect we'll get into. So what is in the core? It begs a question. What's in the core? I believe totally challengeable. I'm falling into this trap of, what's the vision? I think the vision is all around excellence in teaching, scholarship, mentoring, on the one hand. And on the other hand, research and scholarship. And those two things, I think, are what forms, that's how you got so great. And I have had discussions, and I'm sure questions will come up, that it would appear, listening to you, that there's been some less than aggressive investments in those two areas. In fact, some of the scope things have added more and more administrative staff, siphoning off resources from the core and reinvesting in the faculty, reinvesting in research. And boy, I don't think we're going to get through this without doubling down on what made us great and driving ourselves greater. Now, so that's the beginning sketch of this. We'll talk more about how that might get done, I suspect, in a second here. But if that doesn't happen and we just play around in the fringes, we're going to become Me Too, like a lot of other institutions. And that doesn't need to happen. It doesn't need to happen at all. One of the biggest issues I didn't mention a second ago, biggest pressures, is the state and federal funding for a lot of what we do here. It has gone, we'll just take the state, it's gone from about 10%, 10 or 12 years ago, to 6.6% of our total $3.5 billion budget. And there are a lot of people who say, we've got to fix that. Well, I got to tell you, I'll be the first to be out there trying to fix that. But the reality is, given the economics and the economic environment in the state and in our nation, I'm not so sure that's fixable quite so fast. So we better anticipate that 6.6 is going to be 6.3, 6.4, and get ahead of that. But we have to do that in a way that protects the core, and the core is around the teaching and research. Now, teaching for a second. Let me say a few things. I suggested that I'm hearing things that maybe we haven't invested enough, and we're actually disinvesting to some extent, maybe overstated, in the teaching core. There was a recent study, and I'm sure, by the way, all of you have read, I hope, and if you haven't, you should, the issue of academically adrift. What's the academically, right? What's the title? Academically adrift. And what it really says is, I believe intensely, as I said, in the value of a liberal arts education, but there's a real issue here, which is, do we know how to measure the value of liberal arts education? Critical thinking, reasoning, problem solving, writing. And the few studies that are out there that have attempted to answer that question say we don't quite see it in aggregate in the data between freshman year and the end of sophomore year. 2,300 and some odd students, 24 institutions. You ought to take a look at this. Now, that's in an environment where we've been increasing tuition very rapidly. And I think a lot of people in the state legitimately are saying, like you're legitimately asking, am I qualified to lead this organization? Great question, legitimate. I think they're legitimately saying, talk to me once again about the outcomes. I'm paying a lot more for things that go on here than some of these other alternatives, and remind me once again about the outcomes. Now, I don't think that's a simple problem. But yet, this institution at one point solved to a large extent, or had a lot to do with solving for the good of the country, the issue of standardized testing at the secondary education level. In fact, ACT is still in town. And I remember my kids always going through Iowa tests. And I guess my question is, why don't we take this bigger issue on? Why don't you take this on? I know it's hard, but to me that's the fundamental issue for an institution like this. That's a great research topic. And I know you can't, this is very different of teaching about, of testing around not subject matter, what did you learn specifically in a math class or a language class or anything else. And it's around these fairly fuzzy topics that are important in our lives, which is critical reasoning, problem solving, writing. You know them better than I. And I think that's a problem worth solving. And I think a place like this could really solve it and make a difference in that. And I think we kind of owe that to ourselves and to society. Because after all, the only reason we really exist is to make the the people in the state better citizens, more educated, and able to live in a very uncertain, ever-changing world. And at the core of that is the liberal arts. And I think we've got to come out of, we don't know how to measure it, just trust us, which is not you, but in general, what's been going on. Second thing I'll say about teaching is there was a recent study, Gallup conducted it. It's several thousand students 5 years out after they've graduated. Not with graduate degrees, just undergraduate. They're now in the workforce. And they asked them, what contributed the most to your career back in undergraduate school? And some of you may have seen this. They said three things were off the charts. They said a lot of things, but three things were off the charts. One was the genuine sense that the faculty, collectively, all my faculty cared about me. The sense that they wanted me here, they wanted to help me, and they wanted to engage with me. Secondly, they said, I had, and they often said, one professor who inspired me, was incredible. And they opened doors for me in terms and created a passion for me. The third thing they said is some other faculty member pulled me aside and mentored me. Someone I could go to. They may not have been a professor, but they actually someone I could go to and ask tough questions and dilemmas that I'm facing, either in class, with my career. And so there's a really powerful notion of mentorship, one-on-one. Then Gallup asked, very interesting question. Back to the students. Oh, that's fantastic, those three. How many of you had all three? As something somebody called the trifecta. And so I see some people raising their hands. Well, it turns out, according to the data, 19% raised their hands. I would say only 19%. Now I hope it's higher here. I don't know. I suspect it is. But the question I say is, I think that's an opportunity. The people we're competing with in the rivalry for faculty and students are screaming for us to get back in the, and I heard the other day that 70-some touches, somebody in the room with one of the other candidates, 70-some touches for undergraduates is done by graduate students. Again, I don't know if that's true, but if it's even directionally correct, shame on us. There's an opportunity here. That's going to require more faculty, more senior faculty, more money, more resources. But goodness, that's the core of the institution. I can keep going on teaching. And by the way, let me make it clear. I think that's your role. I don't think it's the president's role. I believe in passionately in shared governance here. But you know what? Part of the job, I think, of a president and all the leaders, and including yourselves, is we ask some of the tough questions. And I think there's some data out there that we need to address and ask ourselves, what are we doing about it? I don't have all the answers. Hopefully, together we can get there. My guess is a lot of you have some of the answers. There's a similar agenda, I think, on research, which is, and I'll speak about this from my experience, particularly from IBM. Here's my experience. IBM has major research capability. When we were in crisis mode, we determined that part of the core for IBM was research. And unlike a lot of other institutions, we didn't cut research. We actually increased it and kept funding it. We had to cut other things to maintain that. And that's still going on to today. But one of the issues was, as we did that and started fixing our own, get our house in order, more and more research institutions like you started knocking on our door and asking to engage with us. And my experience has been, honestly, it was a fairly ineffective process of the request. It was often, people would come at us for money and help fund us, and I was searching for, what's in it for IBM? What problem are we trying to solve that you might help us solve? And so there's a coaching and a skill building I think is required. I hope you're doing it, but my suspicion is, at least experience with some other institutions, they're not. And so there's an approach first for money. The second issue is that we would often spend the next 8 to 9 months, even if we said yes, dealing with the issues of intellectual property and who owns them. And we haven't even started anything, and yet we're having this really complicated conversation that, in fact, doesn't close for a long, long period of time. And by then, the enthusiasm to get going and start studying things starts to wane away. We've got attorneys discussing things. And several years ago, when Dr. Jiske moved from Iowa State to Purdue, I started talking about some of these issues with him and the real issues that IBM faces or other large organizations, I suspect, out here in the Midwest, Deere and Caterpillar and on and on and on, are actually not in the silos of your organization quite so neatly. It actually turns out the bigger issues a lot of organizations are facing are interdisciplinary. And so now the next question is, how do, in fact, we get faculty to come out of at Purdue, their departments, and actually work in a more collaborative way? And that created this whole notion of Discovery Park, and I was on the early board of that. And as I got into this set of issues, a couple things I noticed was that, first of all, we had built a series of buildings before we put in place the appropriate programs and faculty support. And so a lot of those buildings were interesting buildings with interesting names and really fantastic support. But the programming side was really missing. Second thing I noticed is this IP issue. And the IP issues, we did some work and said, how many things have we worked on collectively with the corporate world that we've patented and that have made a significant financial impact to Purdue? And it was damn few. I mean, a lot of things that we patented. But in terms of the overall scheme of things, in terms of the budget, the notion that somehow we're going to strike it rich by having a long conversation to control intellectual property was an act, in fact, getting in the way of our ability to collaborate with industry to solve first-of-a-kind problems and, frankly, to often put it back in the public domain. And I understand that there's issues on both sides of this. So I actually think part of what I might be able to help do is work through some of those issues with you. I also might be able to help open some doors. I also have found actually a lot of the research issues at Harvard and the Harvard Business School, I could help people because I knew who to call and how and get the dialogue going to actually know first we're going to listen to and make sure we understand the problem before we actually propose what we want to work on. Maybe we just need to scoot over a little bit, change our approach just a little bit, and we actually can help them solve their problem. And I can keep going. So these are at the core around teaching, scholarship, mentoring, research, and I think there's an opportunity here to go from great to greater. I really do. And that's going to require some heavy lifting to support that. And I'm sure I'm going to get those questions. But that's one piece of ambidexterity. That's in the core. Then there's experimentation. And I don't know where we are, but I've been through this with a lot of institutions. We did this aggressively within IBM. I'm coaching and working with a number of organizations right now on creating test wells around the core. The core is changing. These forces are causing the core to change. Where are we in terms of distance learning? Where are we in terms of hybrid education? There's some data, by the way, that suggests that hybrid learning models, students enjoy them, they appreciate them, they learn more. I don't know. Where are we on that? Where are we on the working with some of the community and technical schools and viewing them as feeders into us? I hope we've got real answers. If not, let's do some more experimenting. And I can keep going, but it seems to me there are a set of logical things we might be trying, and I must be candid with you. When I've raised some of these with some of you, you've basically said, oh yeah, we tried to get that started, and we were told we couldn't do it. We were told we didn't have money. We told there always is a reason. That's culture at work here, my friends. And I think if this stuff's important, we need to solve those can't do, won't do, don't know how to fund issues, because that's our mission. So now then, let me talk just for a second about, what all that says to me in a really simple way is if you ask me what I think should be our mission, our vision, I think it's great to greater. And I don't know why in a place like this we're not trying to be known and own the notion of a Midwestern Ivy. We ought to be, and that's all branding, but we ought to be so damn good people look at us and say, we ought to do that. That's great. I want to go there to study. I want to go there to get mentored. I want to go, and I'll keep going here, because part of the issue of the funding issue is creating new business models. My guess is that if we could crack the code on some of the issues in the core and take it to greater, we might have the license to be, just like the Creative Writers Workshop, is a world-class institution. People come to learn those skills here. Why aren't we the center where people learn how to teach at the higher education level, mentor at the higher education level, coach, great scholarship? If the answer is just go off and do your own thing, I think we've missed an opportunity here. Not just in the branding, but there's also a revenue source there. One of the great things I found in working in the research arena is education, executive education, even in liberal arts, feeds the relationship with a lot of corporations and opens doors to their issues. And particularly junior faculty get a lot more comfortable in working in that environment. So, now then, let me say just a few things and I'll open up for questions. And I'm sure a lot. And there have been a lot of questions about what's my man. I know we're going to have a conversation about shared governance. And I just want to say at the outset, I have not lived in it as intently as most of you. But I have enormous respect for shared governance. Why? Because that's what I've been practicing all my life. Or most of my life's overstated, at least my adult working life. So, how did we, many years ago, you can go read this, it's been written up, how did we get the student body inside of IBM to actually go from great to greater? One of the ways was we engaged in a dialogue with all of our employees, 300,000, 157 countries around the world, and we used social media to ask, what is a great company? It's the very first question. I can tell you what they said that became us, but it was the organization. It wasn't from top down. It was a process of engagement and finding out what they thought, because these are issues not of the mind, they're the issues of the heart. And then we asked, okay, where are we on those 4 things? They said 4 things. We asked, where are we on those 4? And it turns out we were pitiful. We had a lot of gaps in all 4 of those areas. And then we said, okay, specifically, what do we need to do? And I've forgotten now, I'm just trying to remember today, there's something like 57, 52, I can't remember, but in the 50s, of very specific projects. They said, we got to do this and do this and do that. And the organization went to work. And to me, that's a version of shared governance. I'm sure you're going to add more to it, but that's the engagement and the dialogue and discussion together. There's a sense that there's a command and control and somebody at the top in large organizations basically says, go do this. That's been changed a long time ago in most really high-performance organizations. So that's one piece. Then I've heard the second piece, which is that, and I'll try to be blunt here and specific, and I apologize for that, but, hey, with your background, you're just going to be the puppet for the regions. And you're just going to come in and slash the costs. I've heard that. I've actually heard from others in the community, no, and some of you will laugh at this, but since you've taught, you're going to be the puppet of the faculty. And I can keep going, but you see this is going. Because I'm so different, I actually, for some reason, I'm unintentionally threatening a lot of different groups. But I'll tell you also, my experience on those types of issues is the organization is beginning to react to these pressures. And they're feeling the tension, and they're frustrated. And they're not on a common trajectory to the future. And what happens is we kind of start sliding up Maslow's hierarchy. And we start going from the institution and what's right for the institution to what's right for my department or what's right for me. And as the pressure increases, we go up and up and up. And so one of the cultural issues I think this institution faces is reversing that. And I think part of the answer here is giving up a little bit, me too, you too. If all gave up an inch, the metaphor in my mind is we might be able to go miles of rebuilding the institution, rebuilding our state. It doesn't need rebuilding, it needs to go to greater. And I think that's a journey worthwhile. My greatest fear is you don't want to go on that journey. You want to just go back to stay where you are. In fact, what will happen is you won't stay there or fall backwards. So let me pause at that and open it up for questions with the final notion that, I think I can help. If I can't, kick me out of here, literally. kick me out because you've got better things to do, I've got better things to do. But if on the other hand, you think I might be able to help, let's get going. So with that, thank you very much for listening. Love to take your questions.
Thank you. Is this working?
Is the mic on?
Thank you for your comments and for coming to visit us. My name is Leslie Schwalm, professor of history and of gender, women's, and sexuality studies. And I have a question for you. It's a little complex, so I'll go slowly. People from outside academe often don't understand the intimate relationship of tenure, academic freedom, and shared governance. How would you explain to the public, to the people of Iowa, how these three are interrelated? And how would you explain how they come together to advance high-quality teaching and creative, innovative research?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great question, and I've spent a fair amount of time. First of all, I've got to listen and learn. I've got more to do in that whole area, no question about that. But you're on a very, very important issue because it's at the core of the discovery process and the learning process, and even the teaching process of an institution like this. And what that then means is, in fact, a lot of people need to come together as a team and collaborate and work together. And sometimes, as I think it was Derek Bach in his book on higher education in America says, it's a very slow, weird, strange process. But you know what? It's damn well worth protecting. And I think actually in a lot of institutions, and I think the Board of Regents, we have a member of the Board of Regents here with us, she can speak for herself, but my guess is they're equally frustrated with the pace of change and a lot of the things that come with that process. It's a very, very important process. You need to respect it. They come together in various town halls, small teams, little teams, and it's a dialogue that takes place. Here's the problem, I think, which is the only issue I really have, as long as there's really shared accountability. If we're going to talk about shared governance and it's going to be, and tenure and all the right of each faculty member to disengage from the community, and I don't think that is what it is, but it has happened in some institutions, then I think that's an issue. I think shared governance actually comes with shared responsibility. Very clear in my mind that many of the issues I talked about are in your domain. They're faculty domain issues. My only question is, where are you? What are you doing? Are you dealing with them? And I think it's for you to recommend these, and sometimes that takes, in that dialogue of a lot of different people from different eyes, different perspectives, may take a long time, but it's very, very important. Why? Because the institution actually can execute faster once the shared governance process, even if it takes a long time, takes place, because there's much more consensus, and you guys own it. And so, and in that process, as tenure is critical component of this, I actually see you disinvesting from tenured positions. I don't know if that's true, but I'm feeling that. That's a shame if that's the case. If that data is correct, you know, that's a real issue, because it should be going the other way. Thank you. Sir?
Hello, my name is Ed Wasserman. I'm in the Department of Psychological Sciences, Psychological and Brain Sciences. I got it screwed up, we just changed our name. I served as the Faculty Senate President from 1997 to 1998. During that time, I learned a great deal from one of the Board of Regents' most plain-spoken members. Dr. Clarkson Kelly was a physician from Charles City and a conservative Republican who was appointed by Governor Branstad. Dr. Kelly was a loyal Hawkeye, yet he was extremely concerned that the Board of Regents was too aggressively pursuing what he deemed to be an inappropriate business model for managing the University of Iowa. Rather than moving toward President Mary Sue Coleman's ambitious aim of transforming the University of Iowa into a top 10 public research university, he feared that the Regents' own bottom-line business mentality would do just the opposite and turn the University of Iowa into what he called the Walmart of the Big Ten. Dr. Kelly passed away 8 years ago. If he were here now, I suspect that he would view your credentials and candidacy with great alarm and see your possible presidency as equivalent to giving the fox the keys to the henhouse. What would you do, what would you say to allay these concerns?
Well, I understand them, first of all. And secondly, I would say very importantly, and I think there's a lot of education that we need to do. There's a tendency to believe that institutions like the University of Iowa have customers, and the customers are the students. And I think part of this arms race is in that spirit. There's something very different about an institution like this, which is it serves society. It clearly serves the state. We have a clear role in that. And that may be even more important than any set of students. Because, in fact, do we let the students just vote on the curriculum? Do we let the students vote on the homework and workload? Do we actually? And so there are a whole set of issues that I think go way beyond, responsibilities go way beyond just a corporate view of students, customers, get on with it, trim everything else. But by the way, it goes beyond. I mean, my vision, to the extent you will edit this, actually says it's not just the state of Iowa. It's actually, I think we're going to need to play on a national stage. And in fact, this notion of taking ourselves to the top 10, I started to say Big Ten, is not a bad vision at all. I mean, when I started talking about becoming a Midwest Ivy, it's right in that spirit. What that means is we need to double down in some of the things that make an institution like this very, very special. I hear that there is a pressure to homogenize all the key institutions in this state, that it's actually, there's a sense here, many of you have expressed this to me. Again, if I'm incorrect, I apologize, but I hear, no, what the regents are really trying to do, today the budgets came out, and the proposal is 8%, and we get 0. And I asked, why could that be? Because there's a tension here to actually dumb us down to bring the others up. I don't know if that's true, but wow, that's a very dangerous thought. So I understand it. I would fight vociferously to differ, with all due respect, to the notion that I'm just going to be another corporate guy and come in here and slash and burn and rent. I actually think part of the answer here is getting back, going from great to greater, because we can actually then start talking about outcomes. We're damn proud of what's going on. We tell the story. Some of you in this long line will probably ask me what you're going to do to help us tell the story. And I will. But at the same time, I need your help going from great to greater, because it gets a hell of a lot easier to tell the story out there in the world if, in fact, we're really making an impact. And that's going to take some courage here. So I got it, hear it. If you believe that, you shouldn't support me. I wouldn't either, because I think it's actually very, very simple. This is not a corporate enterprise. And we all know that. Let's get on with it. Yes, please.
Hello, thank you for your comments. My name is Lisa Heineman. I'm chair of the history department. My questions is perhaps a little more specific, but I think gets to some of the key issues of the success of the university as well as its significance to the state. As you surely know, the University of Iowa is a key economic force in the state. Over the last 3 years, even setting aside out-of-state tuition, the university has attracted somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.5 billion in external funding, overwhelmingly from such granting agencies as the NIH, the NSF, the Department of Ed, and so on and so forth. And of course, these $1.5 billion have further trickle effects in the economy as we patronize Iowa vendors and so on. And we learn more about Iowa as people perform local studies on, for example, education, the economic situation of Iowa communities. And of course, the results of that research have important impacts on Iowa communities, improving healthcare and the like. This type of research, grant-funded research, runs on a model that's quite different from the business world. It relies on transparency, on open inquiry to topics that are sometimes unpopular, topics whose benefit might not be realized till some point in the medium or even somewhat distant future. And it involves embracing findings, even if they run contrary to popular opinion or to powerful political forces. And my question for you is, what experience do you have working with such granting agencies in academic settings? And what how would this experience, what experience do you have that would help you to set the conditions for the university to continue its record of attracting, very highly competitive funds? There are a lot of other people here who would like to get those fundings. And what elements of your background would help to assure such agencies that the university will be a good steward of their funds and use them in the manner that they consider so important of open academic inquiry?
Great. So once again, I have to reach back in my corporate experience, but we built from scratch and nothing, started at zero, business in the life sciences. And had a lot to do with protein folding, proteomics, you guys, and the technical IT issues to support that. Along that way, we had to spend a fair amount of time with a number of those federal granting institutions. I wouldn't say very familiar, but I'm very aware of the differences in that. And at the core of this, we're talking about basic discovery, and very important. You've made the point about sometimes controversial basic discovery. It's a very important part of the process. And we have supporters of that in a lot of these federal institutions. One of the things I've learned is high-quality people on our side in that role, real transparency in what we're doing, and building a working rapport with those agencies so that there tends to be a pecking order because they actually know certain institutions are really easy to work with, certain institutions are much more transparent and much more, in their words, I think they use a different phrase, but I would say steerable and coachable to make sure the project doesn't veer off into some personal domain. And so part of the things I've been in that arena, and I think one of the things I've really, really learned is transparency really, really helps. And being good at what you're doing is critical. And when you're not good at it, asking for help and bringing other teams in. So once again, I would say it's more the organizational backroom sort of sides of this. But now, let me also say, I think, to be honest with you, I think we should go get all that we can. I actually believe we should probably move higher in terms of the size and magnitude and impact of some of the issues we face, because it's real easy to get smaller projects, and a lot of them. And there's a Coase's law effect in there that causes a lot of less bang for our buck. And so moving higher in that is part, I think, a very, very important issue. So that's my observations to your question. Thank you.
Hi, Kimber McLeod, Communication Studies. So your resume lists yourself as the managing principal of a firm called Executing Strategy, but the newspaper reported that no business with that name is registered with the Secretary of State's office in Colorado, and representatives with the Avon Area Chamber of Commerce say they have no knowledge of this business. So I was just wondering what's up with that?
Yeah. Well, here's the deal. So that's a Massachusetts registered organization that I used quite a while ago for a lot of my consulting work, particularly when I was on the faculty. In the more recent time period, I have the current institutions that I'm working with, organizations that I'm working with, they've asked for me to personally be liable and not have an LLC in the middle of this. And so actually, I'm being paid directly, and it's not going through an LLC or anything else. And so I let that lapse. There's no reason Colorado should have it, so shame on me. I too quickly pulled it out of my head, put it on the resume. There's no Colorado corporation. I live in Colorado. That's my post office box. And I purposely, intentionally let it lapse. So hence the reason no one knows about it in Colorado. They wouldn't. Massachusetts will know. Massachusetts will, I suspect, say that it lapsed because I don't need it anymore. It's me personally working with these organizations.
Quick follow-up. Are you a performance artist?
Why?
Just kidding.
No. Why do you ask the question? Because I missed the context.
Oh, I was just wondering if you were putting us on.
No.
Okay.
Yes, my name's Sheldon Kurtz from the College of Law. First, I want to thank you for your opening remarks. They were very interesting. I have pardon?
However.
Well, no, there's no however. I have a question that can be answered with yeses or nos, and then maybe yes or no, I guess. Okay, so over the course of the last year, one of the big issues here in the University of Iowa has been the Regents funding model relating to performance-based funding. And as we understand it at this campus, that would have resulted in a transfer of $47 million from our institution to the other two Regents universities. Can you imagine any circumstance under which you, as president of the University of Iowa, could ever support a transfer of funds from this institution to the other institutions, or unequal treatment in terms of how our institution is funding? And if your answer to that is no, and the Regents did it, would you resign?
Well, hold on before we get to the no and
Okay.
resign. Because actually,
yeah.
because you asked, can I imagine? Yes, I can imagine some reasons that that might be the case. I think you can too. For example, it could be actually that this institution is better at raising on its own behalf and is actually more self-sufficient. Might that be the case? I'm not saying it is. So I can create hypotheticals as well on the other side of this thing. So yes, I can imagine them. Next question.
Well, the next question was if, could you maybe expand on that? This was as you know, I'm sure, a proposal that because of the way we would fund, monies would flow out of this institution effectively into the others. Are you saying that you could imagine supporting that?
It depends. Yes, I can imagine reasons why one might support that.
Well,
you
I'll
too.
leave my question. Give us an example of when you would support such a thing.
I just did.
I missed it. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Might it be that we don't need the money as sharply as some of the other institutions? Might it be that they have greater needs and there's only a limited amount that the legislature can spend? Why are we having a conversation that we need 1/3, just to pick the number, of the? It could actually be that there are legitimate needs at in other institutions, and there may be a period of time where they need more funding. It could actually come back the other way if I think some issues about collaboration across the state are coming up here, but there might be a time when some of that money might come back to us when we need it more. And I would say to the other schools, scoot over and let that and support us just as we were going to support you. So yes, I can imagine reasons for that. Now you're going to ask me where am I right now on that? I fully understand. I don't know. I think the devil's in the details. Am I close enough to details? Absolutely not.
Okay.
I actually think, from what I've read, is that the title sounds great, but there is potential for a lot of mischief down underneath there. And I wouldn't put it in the context of fairness. Mm-hmm. I put it in the context of, is it right for the state to in fact do that? Mm-hmm. And I would have, I'm pointing at Katie here, I think that's a fair conversation, but I wouldn't approach it like, gee, we need our 1/3. Mm-hmm. I mean, you sound like, not you, I mean, the hypothetical here sounds like my kid's coming at me, telling you, because this daughter got so much, the other one wants the same. Well, wait a minute, they're in different contexts. I think context matters.
You've answered my question. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm Gary Gusson. I'm retired and very conservative academically. I'm currently president of the Emeritus Faculty Council. I agree with a lot of what you said, and I disagree with some too, but it doesn't matter. I have a specific thing I'd like you to comment on. So in Florida, there's a woman who is suing Florida State University, claiming her Title IX rights were violated because Florida State didn't adequately investigate her allegations that she'd been raped by a football player. I'm interested to know how you see the use of Title IX in this case and what major universities need to do to protect women from sexual assault.
Well, I don't know that I have a great answer to your Title IX. Let me come at the bigger issue here, because I hear this coming, and I hope I'll answer at least the last half, but I think they're intertwined.
I'm interested a little bit in the sort of conflict between what have been problems with women's rights on campus and the operation of the athletic program.
Yeah, fair enough. But I actually want to broaden it. I understand that, but let's start just the one layer higher, if you don't mind, because I think I sense that the issue of sexual harassment is front and center in the dialogue here, and I must honestly say I'm a little perplexed by it, because I spent some time talking about culture, and this is a cultural issue at the core of this. And I thank my daughter, who went to Pomona, for actually enlightening me, because I said to her, what's going on? When you went to Pomona X years ago, was this really part of it? She said, of course, but I sense what you're saying is a little more intense now. And she said, I actually think for some reason it's become a part of the culture, maybe the male culture, to actually do inappropriate, say inappropriate things. And then I go off and say, okay, I got it. I believe that if you're going to change culture, the action of leaders is critical in this. And by the way, doing nothing and saying that we're going to use some legal issues and what have you to actually delay doing something, it's a real issue. I read the 6-point plan. I can't even remember all 6 points. I mean, shame on me, I guess. But I actually have a sort of a 2-letter plan, N-O. We don't do that. We're not going to tolerate it. And we're going to actually go after, to the hilt, the perpetrators. Sure, and I don't care the hell who they are, whether they're football players or whatever. And if that then, and that's how I think, that because we don't do that, I think we then open up the door for a lot of other issues like Title IX and mischief in other places in athletics. But the first things first, which we don't do that. We're not a community that does do that. And again, shame on me if I don't deal with that. And I think part of dealing with it is let's get away from all the other things. It's wrong. When it occurs, we actually go after the person who caused the problem and deal with it. Deal with it quickly.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Lisa Gardner. I'm a librarian. My question for you is, having spent your career in industry producing and selling consumer goods, could you please comment on where public higher education lies between a consumer good and a public good, and between a marketable commodity and a basic right?
Wow, great. I don't even know how to begin to even compare it to a consumer good, because I actually think it's we've moved to a universal education system. I think the data would say anything over 40% in terms is considered to be a universal education. So it's becoming close to a right, and it's not a consumer good that gets marketed like a consumer good with average. Now, I know we're doing a lot of that and trying to get our message out, but at the core of this, if we actually trivialize it and say it's just like a consumer good and it's no different than a deodorant or no different, we missed the whole point. We're trying to prepare future citizens for being very productive in our society and actually adding back. There's a ton of data that all of you know better than I, that people who go through our process actually are healthier, vote more productive, have higher incomes. All those, I think, are wrapped in this. And I think so it's way beyond some corporation selling some consumer good. I think, and that's where the state comes in and the federal government comes in, because I think they have every right in the world to make sure we're doing it the best possible way. So to me, it's not even discussable putting together in the same context. Maybe I missed something. Give me feedback on that.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
Hello, welcome to Iowa City. My name is Brian Gulnick, and I teach Spanish. I wanted to ask you something very specific in order that you can talk about something much broader. And the specific thing I want to talk to you or ask you about is a leadership profile that you wrote about Felipe Calderón,
yes,
the former president of
Yep.
Mexico. And
Good.
It seems to me in this leadership profile, you invite readers to see him in a very positive light as decisive and effective in dealing with a very corrupt public utilities union in Mexico City. In reality, Felipe Calderón led his country as the principal architect into a disastrous war against drug cartels, which has cost the lives of probably 100,000 of his citizens without doing one damn thing to increase public security in that country, and brought it to the brink of ruin. Do you think that Felipe Calderón, do you still think that he's a positive leadership example? And what criteria should we use to judge effective institutional leadership of public institutions?
Well, history will tell the time, sir. But no, I'm not going to fall down that trap. I use the case for a very specific portion of his tenure, so I use tenure, and it has to do with the corrupt union and the issue of how you actually take action in that. And we can go into the specifics of that. I actually then saying, because he dealt well with that means that he is okay in how he dealt with the cartels and the drug. I mean, the time, and I actually said this to President Calderon, the time that you start actually inadvertently killing your own citizens, you now really have a lot of heat here. And so I think those are two very different issues. And, so because he may not have dealt effectively with one, make him a totally ineffective leader in certain other areas. No, I can actually pull those apart, quite frankly. I think you can too.
At what point does the body count get so high
No.
that a leader's profile is irrevocably damaged
Yeah, no,
in all
I'm not.
areas?
I'm not going to go down that path with you for the simple reason because he did some great things on the other side of this. Now, does that mean he dealt because of the good things he did over here? So let me reverse your question. How good would we have to be over here to think some of the things over here? And it doesn't
If someone
fly.
does a great job taking care of 2 trees with one hand and burns down the rest of the forest with the other, are they a good leader?
No, of course not. That's not what we're talking about here.
Well, it is what we're
No,
talking
no,
about.
it isn't. It's what you're trying to conflate these issues with all due respect. And I actually think there's some real important lessons in leadership in a difficult public environment for how Calderon dealt with Lucy-Fairse. And I think that's worth teaching to then say, put him up on a pedestal because of that, in general, I think is a real problem. And we have a tendency to go black and white on these hard leadership issues and say, because one thing was good and the other thing was bad, I know there's some calculus that we can add them all up and say, oh, and by the way, it all had to be bad? No, let's get a little more specific here. Let's pull these things apart. So with all due respect, I got you on both sides of this thing. I really agree with you in terms of what's going on here with the cartels and the unions and all the rest. Please understand what he did took a lot of courage of a festering problem in terms of Lucy-Fairse. Thank you.
Hi there, my name is James Otavi. I'm a student here at the University of Iowa. And what I wanted to ask was, if you were to be selected as the president of the University of Iowa, what area would you look to strengthen first? Research or education? Why and how?
Tough one. Because my honest answer is I'd invest in both like crazy. And they're part at the core. If I had to pick, I don't know. I think in some parts, once again, the devil's in the details here. And I think we need to be careful, or I need to be careful in answering that, because I don't think there's one University of Iowa. I don't think it's all the same. I mean, I actually see this, I'm off your point, but to make my point, people will talk about what's going on at Harvard University. There isn't a Harvard University. It's a collection of various schools. And in fact, they're all under some of the pressures I described to varying different degrees. And so for some parts of this, and I'll just speak, my sense is, and you've got the expert here in front of me, but my sense is in the medical arena, you better double down on that research side because a lot of things are changing pretty damn fast. In the side of arts and sciences, my guess is that it has a lot to do with improving the teaching and to get a lot more bang for the buck and really putting the right people in front of the classrooms and inspiring students, future leaders, et cetera. So I'm not trying to avoid your answer. I think it's a little bit of this in different places, a little bit of that in others. Thank you.
Hello. Hi, my name is Naila. I'm a student at the University of Iowa. First off, I wanted you to clarify that analogy you made of students to customers. I think you had said that customers can't vote on or that students can't vote on curriculum and can't create curriculum, but I just wanted to let you know students in fact do create curriculum. In fact, this semester is a theme semester.
May I comment there? May I just comment?
Can I finish?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I thought you were moving to another issue.
And this semester is called Social Justice. And students also solidify living learning communities. These are the ways that we are organized in our residence halls. So you can go ahead.
So, yes, your input is very important to the process. But I think, even here, and I'm glad that you're involved in giving a lot of people in the room feedback on the curriculum and the learning environment that you're in. I think you have all the right. I'm sure really want that input. But at the end of the day, it's not you guys voting on it. It's actually the faculty determining. The reason that's in that way, and maybe we should talk about that as an issue, but the reason it's that way is because there's a higher role that this institution plays than just with the students. It's making a difference in the state, the economic development of the states, good citizenry of the state, and frankly, I believe, more broadly than even the state. And so it's in that context that the shared governance model says we vest the ultimate responsibility of that to the people closest to you, which are the members of the faculty.
Okay.
And they do seek your input.
And moving on from that, I have a question for you. This question is related to your past experience within business. What kind of experiences did you have directly and completely and actively addressing the concerns and complaints of employees that aren't necessarily within administrative positions that might work in like lower level positions?
I'm sorry, could you ask the last portion of that just again to make sure I have it? What experience did I have in dealing with?
In like actively and directly addressing their complaints and concerns and coming up with direct solutions for that in a timely fashion.
Yeah. Well, and by the way, I find this a very important issue because I sense a lot of frustration in that area from multiple conversations you've been having here in this room over the last week and a half. And I must say that the core issue in my mind is taking action and stopping some of the debate. In my own background, to specifically answer, we had a structure where we had multiple constituencies. We had African American, we had gay and lesbian and LGBT community. In fact, we unbundled that. We had Latinos. We had a whole series of groups that rightfully felt that they had different needs, and we need to be respectful of those. We then created a structure where senior executives worked with each one of those. A senior executive worked with each one of those to be the advocate in understanding those needs. And when we get to then get into the environment, taking action, that executive was in fact someone who owned that. And I played that role for one of those groups, and so I've spent a lot of time. It was actually women's.
Okay.
So, and what was my role? My role was to listen, learn, help them. It was a support mechanism to be the advocate for change in their own specific needs. And I wonder where we are here on the campus in terms of that. I don't really know. But that's the role I played. I think it's a very important role. You're going to ask me about LLCs next?
No, my final question has to do with something that you said just now in your speech. I guess I recognize a sort of enthusiasm about distance learning and just did a little quick Google search that sometimes distance learning costs a little more than taking classes on the physical campus. So I'm just curious why.
No. Frankly, I actually believe I'm more enthusiastic about hybrid learning models, which has got a distance component as well as a classroom piece. Those are more interesting models to me, and I think there's some evidence that some students learn more and retain more from that. And we can talk about.
Have you spoken to students about
I'm sorry?
that? Have you spoken with students
Yes.
about this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And students will say, I actually like that model quite a bit. Why? Because I can actually listen to lecture I can listen to lecture over and over again, and I can go back through it. And I don't necessarily have that when I have to sit in a classroom. That's one. Secondly, chances are not everyone here is a great teacher. Some are better than others. That's a reality. And in fact, we want to create mechanisms for the people who are great to coach the people who could be better, particularly the younger members. But too often, in some of the introductory courses, we actually send people who are just beginning teachers, and we get a little sloppy. And what happens in a distance learning is we could take somebody really great and videotape that, and so everybody's getting the best. So then I can keep going. There's several things that students play back as to why they really like that. They can deal with it, their lives more easily. Often, you know better than I, but at least the students I talk to, many of them are carrying not just an educational role, and project roles on campus, but they're actually maybe in leadership roles. Many of them are having jobs, and so they've got their lives aren't fitting it quite as neatly into the calendar as we like. This gives them a little more flexibility. So there's a lot. So that's the hybrid model. Distance learning is another set of issues. Distance learning, in my view, has some of the more positive characteristics I just described, but at the same time is really searching for an economic model. And if we're not careful, I think a lot of institutions are beginning to hollow themselves out because people aren't necessarily willing to pay. There's also an enormous dropout rate and lack of stickiness in just pure distance learning models. So now then, having said that, there clearly are a lot of people taking snippets of distance learning. And here now we go into badging. Might you be able to collect some of those with some measurements and testing to actually make sure they really did learn? Might that be doable, and collect them to get to a degree? I don't know. That's a debate I think there's no clear answer to right now, and it's a debate worth having.
Does that have something to do?
Sorry.
Welcome to our campus, Mr. Harreld. My name is Resmia
Bruce.
Oral. I'm the director of the Child Protection Program at our university hospital, also the co-chair of the Trauma-Informed Care Task Force that we established 3 years ago. There is a silent social revolution taking place in America for the last 10 years. We are changing our mindsets regarding how to address health and human services-related issues, educational issues, justice issues. Wherever we encounter human beings, we're starting to look at those issues that bring individuals to our services in a different way, which is called trauma-informed care. This comes from the realization for the last 20 years that 55 to 65% of all American population is dealing with childhood trauma. To be specific, in Iowa, 55% of the population has reported childhood adversity in 2012. 15% reported 4 or more childhood adversity that has significant impact on their behavioral, social, medical, and mental health issues. And the most common public health issues are significantly related to childhood trauma. In our institutions, including our campuses, unfortunately, we are constantly in a crisis management mode. On our campuses, alcohol is a huge, big problem. We don't look at why these young people are drinking themselves to all kinds of troubles, but we just try to fix the alcohol problem behind which may be childhood adversity. Our 4-year graduation rate on our campus is barely above 50%. 6-year graduation rate is close to 70%, and we always have a retention problem, just like other campuses. My question to you is, what are your thoughts about how to convert our campus to a more humane, and you said customer, but I want to say client or just student, student-focused environment so that we can learn our students in all the details of their lives so that we can provide them with all the support they need, including behavioral, medical, mental health services on this campus.
Don't go away, because if you don't mind, I'd like to talk a little bit. Because some of what you said, so first of all, everything you said I think is real and real important. The next question is, can we deal with it, do we need to deal with it individually? Or can we deal with it in a programmatic, larger way, like for education and alcohol and abuse and stress management and living, or do we need to get to the individuals? And you're probably going to say both, but I'm curious as to, in your area of expertise, this is yours. Is it specific or are there broad things or both?
Both, but first and foremost, we need a systemic, programmatic implementation on our campus and change of mindsets by involving the entire campus with their input. That's what we're working on the hospital side. Yeah. I really would like to see that occur for our students, for our employees, and our human resources offices to be involved in this process as well.
So I'm going to let you go, but if I'm back and the regents or whomever here decides that I might play a larger role than just standing here right now, I'd like you to come see me, because I actually think my next question is going to be, what's keeping us from dealing with that? what type of investment, how do we get going here? And I think in the spirit of another, I don't know, 20 people or whatever behind you, if you don't mind, this is a real important area, let's not drop it. And now, because my next set of questions is, why, this seems obvious to me. What am I missing? Where's the obstacle? So
Thank you. I'd be more than happy to
I know you
work
will.
with you.
Thank you.
John Scott. I'm a professor in the School of Art and Art History. And my question is about integrity and transparency. According to an Associated Press Des Moines Register article of last year, the financial interests of Regent Bruce Rastetter benefited from a $480,000 interest-free loan from Iowa State University. You probably know about that. So
I know about that?
I thought you probably would know.
It's the first time I've heard it, but go ahead.
Okay, well, you're now informed.
Okay.
So, as you might imagine, citizens of the state of Iowa are concerned about issues of conflict of interest and the appearance of conflict of interest. So my question is, do you currently have, or have you had business or financial dealings, including consulting work, with any member of the search committee or the Iowa Board of Regents?
No.
Thank you. Have you already been offered this job by any of those people? Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm staff here at the university, and I have a question that I'm going to read so that I say it correctly. Please describe an administrative initiative you've developed that empowered others, encouraged innovation, improved morale, and promoted a climate of inclusion.
Ooh. One activity, I don't know. I guess I could probably pick 20 or 22 of those. What really comes to my mind is, again, I'm going back to my experience in, well, actually, I was going to go back to IBM, and I built a lot of new businesses. You may have read about some of them. Some of them have been written up. And in each of those teams, all those things happened. Go find those people and talk to them. And it actually became contagious for the organization. But let me go another direction. I would actually pick my interrelationship with my second-year MBA students and the process in classroom, out of classroom, the mentoring and empowering. And actually, part of that mentoring process is asking the difficult questions of each of them, because some of it is around career, some of it is about, so it's asking them to think a little more clearly about their career.
Remember, I'm staff, and I'm asking about administrative initiatives.
Yeah, thank you. So I don't know that I have any. Now what? It's staff? I don't know. I haven't been in that role. I mean, I could go back to IBM and I had staff reporting to me.
As CEO, you have never been in the role?
No. No.
Can you speak to that a little further?
What more would you like me to say?
You never dealt with the policies of your companies or procedures?
Of course I did. I discussed them. I had influence. You asked the CEO. No, I never had that role. And by the way, so I had an awful lot of influence, discussion, support. I can talk about what we did with the legal team to change policies and to build various practices. But please understand, that's a peripheral role for me because I didn't manage legal. I didn't manage HR. So I don't want to actually, in my zeal to try to answer your question, actually step over what I did and didn't do. So.
Okay. Sorry for interrupting you. Go ahead with your MBA student example then.
No, I'm done.
Oh, okay.
Okay, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm short. Hi, I'm Aspen. I'm a sophomore here. My question has more to do with your representation of underrepresented groups at IBM. You actually wrote a piece. It's called The Leading Strategic Removal. I'm sure you remember it. It says, quote, "The change process involves disciplined conversation, actions, associated learning by senior team, and the diffusing of these learning capabilities into the community." You go on to say, after decades of research, systematic change is still not understood. Now, in your resume, all that you have is the millions and billions, sometimes dollars, that you brought to your corporation. There's no discussion of what you've done for workers. Even when my colleague asked you about what you've done for workers, you never said, though you just said you have a lot of influence, any policies that you facilitated the initiation of.
Of what? Of what?
Of bettering working conditions for the little man, the underrepresented population. My fear is that you would bring that same precedent here. So what are initiatives that you would bring forth that would accommodate students who feel underrepresented, not heard, not cared for, not accommodated? What would you do exactly?
Well, I guess the first thing to do, and I talked about culture, and I think the leader, a leader, and all of you are playing that role in some portion of this institution, but I think the actions of leaders to pull those groups in, pull them in, is a very, very important activity. So I would actually reach out to that community and get them involved and engaged. And I think there's a two sides to this issue in my mind. I would be interested in your feedback. But one issue is I actually think that a lot of communities like yours need their own environment, and they need to have their own space.
Communities like mine?
Yeah.
What's my community?
In African American, for example. There needs to be, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, I'm listening.
So I think there needs to be a space in there, and that's absolutely fine. But at the same time, you need to be part of the greater community to the extent you use the words of being excluded. That shame on us. We need to pull you in and get you involved. You have a lot of really great ideas. One of the things I've learned about the broader D word of diversity is that if all we do is hang out with ourselves, we get the same sort of opinions. People from different backgrounds have different perspectives that are really valuable.
I do want to note that I never said, did I say black students? Did that
No,
come
I
up?
did. You asked me.
You said that?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just making sure. Okay, well, thank you for your answer.
Thank you.
Howdy.
Howdy.
My name's Landon. I'm a member of the Graduate Student Union, and I'm the financial officer, so I'd like to talk a little about numbers with you. So you lamented the fact that people like me are teaching a lot of the intro classes on campus, and I'm a little upset that you think I'm not doing a great job. But my question is about how you're going to have us funded if you're not going to have us doing a lot of the teaching. And the reason why I ask is because we want to be a top-tier research institution. I think we want to in this room. So my question is how you're going to get us doing research if you're not going to have us teaching. Are you going to still fund us or cut us out entirely or what?
I think as a whole, some of you are going to teach and get paid for it. And if you're not getting paid enough, we ought to talk about that. Secondly,
I'd be happy to.
Yeah, but I mean, my simple answer is, shame on us for not paying people appropriately, and I feel the tension there. By the way, if it's truly, again, I don't know, I'm hearing this is the data I'm hearing from you. I have been around long enough that we often in these types of forums throw out data, and then we actually get it. It looks a little different than what we throw out. And so I have to be careful not to carry and amplify that. But I hear that the number is 70% in terms of touches, whatever touches is. And if that's the case, I think some of those people should be doing projects, support, maybe TA support, but actually, they may not be directly the interface point for the students, but actually a support point for other senior faculty members. And I can keep going. You know them better than I. And I think all those are mechanisms to pay your community appropriately. But if the answer is we only have one of those and we're not going to pay you, I got real issues with that. You should too.
So are you going to cut graduate student lines or what for teaching
Yeah,
or research?
am I gonna
Are
cut
you going
what?
to cut any graduate student lines for teaching or research?
I have no idea.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Harreld. I'm Erin Brothers.
Bruce, Aaron,
Thank you, Bruce. Erin Brothers, Vice President and President-elect for Staff Council. At some point, you'll be faced with a controversy that will likely have media attention. What is your approach to handling controversy while respecting transparency?
Well, actually, the answer is transparency. Get the issues out as quickly as possible. Now, there may be an individual right that we need to protect depending upon the situation. Got to be respectful of that. But on the other hand, by and large, I am a person that says, let's get the issues out on the table. And the sooner we do that, the better. We all see this. Some institutions dribble things out, and it just becomes, you take an important issue and it becomes a huge issue. So my approach is, let's get the facts out as soon as we know the facts, and then let's start dealing with the more remedial underlying set of issues. But I think the notion of that we can sort of in this type of community, so sweep a few things underneath and keep them closed is really, really dangerous. And by the way, there's a bigger issue here for me at any rate, and I'm sorry to say this, or not sorry to say it, but I'm sorry for taking the time to say it. But I think, look, we're in really important roles, and we're trying to teach and mentor other people to be really important contributors to our society. I have a real problem if, when the first time some big issue comes up, I or any of us sweep it under the table and not completely transparent, because we're actually sending the signal to all the people that we're mentoring and teaching that that's the appropriate behavior. It's not. We know that. So, yeah, there will be issues of heat. They'll be difficult, but I'm a big believer in transparency. Cures a lot of things. You are really
short. I know.
No, I was going to say patient. You've been trying to get to that front of line for a long time.
I am.
And I'm interrupting you. Go ahead.
Yes, you are. I'm Sarah Riley. I'm an attorney in Cedar Rapids. I'm a second-generation Hawkeye, and I've been paying for the third generation. My son graduated in May from the College of Law after graduating 3 years earlier with a political science degree. My daughter, Molly, will graduate in December after 3.5 years with a BA in theater and a minor in political science. I came here because when I read the Gazette, I was furious to see that we had somebody who had never been in any leadership or administrative role at an institution, especially one that I love so much. It upset me. So I decided to come here. I must admit I didn't exactly have an open mind, and your long speech did not help. And the reason is, while you openly admitted that you don't really know that much about different things, and this is going to be a learning process, you made it sound like this institution is on the way down. When my son started at the University of Iowa, we were ranked 75th in the U.S. News and World Report ranking. We're now 71st. That's a good thing. You said it'd be nice to have us be a public Ivy. We've been a public Ivy since 1985. I happened to take 2 seconds to look it up. So my question is, when you have no experience at all in education, you admit, well, I don't know this, and you talk about Gallup polls that didn't even necessarily question a single Iowa student, why did you even apply for this job?
Good question, and I've tried to answer that question. I think I can help. If you don't think I can help, I totally respect that.
But why do you think you could help if you
Because
have no
I've worked
background?
through transformation and taking an institution from whatever the numbers are to something higher.
But you don't even know where this institution
Yeah,
is.
but there's a lot of, well, okay, educate me.
Well, okay,
So,
you talked about it on the way down. You
I
said
didn't
it
say
wouldn't
on the
be-
way down. I'm
well,
sorry.
you said, okay, whatever.
I'm sorry. I'm going to stop you. I did not say on the way down.
Okay.
I said this is a great institution. Now, let's
Okay,
and I didn't say it's going down.
Okay,
Did
fine.
I?
You said it would be nice if it would become a public Ivy, which it is, and you should know that if you're applying for a job.
I've
and I
read
just
the
don't understand
website as well.
which website?
Wikipedia.
I'm not on Wikipedia.
Okay,
I
but
don't
it
go
says
to
that
Wikipedia.
about you. What are you on?
I am on public Ivies according to Green Guides. I don't go to Wikipedia. I'm an attorney.
Okay. Now what?
Well, you should know that the institution
I'm
is a
sorry.
public Ivy if you're saying, I'd like to see us become a public Ivy. So I'm just wondering why you applied and you said you don't really know. So
Well,
thank you.
No. Let's go. Whoa. Okay, so it says that. I actually do see that in the Wikipedia site, and you've got it. Okay. Are you going to just shut me down, or can I say?
I haven't said anything, sir.
I know. I'm just watching your face expression and frustration, and if we took the weighted average of the Ivy League schools, what would it be in terms of rankings?
What does that have to do
I'm
with
just
you
asking a
saying-
question. I
Well-
don't think it would be 70th. I think we can do better.
Well, of course it's not 70. The Ivies are all in the top 15. But
So I think
you
we
said
ought
a
to-
public
I
Ivy.
think we can get into that league. Do you?
Do I think that University of Iowa is going to pass Northwestern and Michigan and be a top 10 school? No, I love my university,
Fair
and
enough.
we're the best school in the state, and
You
we
should
are on the
remain-
way up.
You should remain exceedingly skeptical and exceedingly negative on me. I got it. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Dexter Gollinghorst, and I'm not here to engage in any sort of argument with you, but I have the honor of serving our undergraduate students, which is a population of over 22,000 on-campus students. And I'm a little bit concerned that you didn't address any student needs in your initial vision. So I guess my question to you is, what is the biggest challenge facing undergraduate students, and how would you engage those students to fix that?
Well, I mean, listening to you and even some of this conversation this afternoon, I think the issues of what we've touched on already of sexual assault, minority relationships, and inclusiveness, I think are huge issues. I also did pick up that there is a real need, and again, there's only a few students, for more engagement with faculty and more mentoring, and they would really appreciate that. And that in certain pockets, I don't know how prevalent it is, and excuse me for not having that data, that there's a real opportunity there. At the same time, I started the day with a group of the student leaders, and I think there is they collectively, without picking on any individual, feel like they are not fully engaged in a lot of the issues. And I think part of the leadership of again, all of us, ought to be pulling them in, listening to them, solving some of their issues. To the extent we're not doing that, they're going to continue to feel frustrated. So, and I think this goes to the core of what I'm about, which is I think to move this institution, even though we may not be able to, don't want to, from great to greater, is actually a process of all of us giving up a little bit and working for the benefit of the whole. I think it really applies to the students in a number of respects. Thank you. Do you want to, no?
There's one more minute before class is over.
It's 6:14. We've made it abundantly clear at the beginning that 6:15
It's 6:14, sir. And I have a true or false question, since we're in class.
Go ahead.
Is that all right? True or false? True or false, you would make a condition of your employment at the University of Iowa as their president to include a tenured faculty position in an academic department?
True or false? Let me just say no, I would not.
False.
I think it's false.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I just want to correct a misimpression. I don't have a question. You indicated that we probably have some poor teachers. Now, I understand your error. You've been hanging around Harvard where it's a real problem.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.